Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth. Again, I am your host, Laura Navaquin, and today we are diving into a crucial topic for any business owner: creating strategic partnerships that fuel your business growth. So, whether you're just starting out or have been in the game for years, building the right partnerships and relationships can take your business to new heights. So, today, our guest, Melissa Lohrer, the founder of Waverly Avenue Consulting, with over 13 years of experience working in agencies. Melissa launched her own consulting business with the goal of redefining success in the creative world. Waverly Avenue helps agency owners and consultants build businesses that align with their goals and as well achieve seven-figure success. I'm excited to talk with Melissa today about the strategies behind forming powerful partnerships that truly drive growth. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on today's episode. I know that I've gone through your website and I know a little bit about your backgrounds, but before we jump into anything specific, I wanted to give you the floor and ask you about how you even got started in the first place with this line of work.
Yeah. So I'm an agency growth consultant. And before I started my business, I spent 13 years working in-house at agencies. I started out on the account side and kind of climbed the ladder through to business development. And my last role was as a head of growth at an indie agency. And honestly, I started my own business because I became increasingly frustrated with a broken agency model, the burnout, the feast and famine cycles, the daily fire drills. And I quit my job because I just needed a break. I needed to get off that like hamster wheel. But really, it was also to help me find my happiness. Being in my mid 30s, I was, thinking like, is this what my career is going to look like? I wasn't motivated to do the job I was doing every day, and I wanted to find something that really lit me up and that I was really passionate about. So the journey of my business has been about that: finding my happiness, finding my passion, finding a purpose that really energized me.
Yeah, that's great. So I know with that, you mentioned taking that leap to find your happy place, essentially, and the work that fulfills you and keeps you motivated to show up each and every day and be able to put in your best efforts. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this. So moving from a secure job, if you will, into entrepreneurship, what were some of those feelings that you were feeling, aside from finding your happiness and the desire to do that, but did you have any particular nerves that you had to work through to make that leap into entrepreneurship yourself?
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, I look back and like starting a business was never part of my plan when I left. I
Mhm.
left because I needed a break and I didn't really know where that was going to take me. Um, but also in hindsight, there was always this entrepreneurial bug in me. And I think from a young age, I knew at some point I was going to own some kind of business. I didn't know when I resigned that was going to be then. Um, but yeah, for one, I didn't know people like me in a biz dev role could, be a consultant. I didn't really consider taking what I knew in house and making that a business. But as I started networking and talking to people, I realized how much value that skill set was and how much I had to offer other businesses. And that's when I started to think about how can I monetize this and turn this into a business. But yeah, I mean, the comfort of a 9 to 5, the consistency of a paycheck, those are all things that, I don't think I ever knew entrepreneurship was an option for me.
Mhm.
I thought of entrepreneurship as like you have this idea, like Sarah Blakely with the idea for Spanx, and then you build this business. Like I didn't think about other ways into entrepreneurship, which is taking a skill set you have that maybe is rare or or highly valuable in the industry you work in, and turning that into a business.
Mhm.
Um, and so, it doesn't have to be this like big idea, and you don't have to have this big plan. Truthfully, I'm a believer of just get started, just get out there and do it. You learn by doing.
Mhm.
And that's definitely been the story of my business. Nothing I've done was part of a plan. It was just I started doing it, and I've with that has come failures, but has also come some great successes. And so, yeah, there was no great entrepreneur plan. It was just, step by step. I know this is something people want. Maybe I can start charging
Mhm.
for it. That leads to, oh, I like doing this. I don't want to do that. Let me do more of this. And
Mhm.
just kind of step by step getting there. But definitely there's a lot of, when you're going through your journey as a business owner, there are definitely days where you're like, ooh, I miss that consistent paycheck.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, your highs are higher than if you're in a consistent 9 to 5 job. You don't have the consistency, but you also have higher peaks in terms of revenue, in terms of exciting wins and projects that, you don't get with consistency. So it just depends on the kind of person you are and what feels good to you. But I definitely am sort of built for that entrepreneurship life and the ups and downs that come with it.
Yeah, and I think a great point that you made within that as well is that you don't always necessarily need this solid plan in order to make the jump. And even for yourself, you didn't necessarily plan to go into entrepreneurship when you left your 9 to 5 because you just really needed a break at that point in time. But even for those who are pondering and considering a leap or a transition into entrepreneurship from a secure job, if you will, sometimes we can have an idea or that a baseline of a plan, but it doesn't need to be rock solid because just as you said, sometimes you learn from doing. So by taking that leap and getting started and getting going, you are making progress and we move forward and we learn from everything that we're going out and doing. And the reason why I say that, because sometimes you have individuals that'll sit and try to make the perfect plan that they never actually get started with anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're waiting for that solid plan that's failure proof and whatever
Yeah.
it may be.
Or you actually work on this plan for so long and you launch it and nobody wants it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's the point of spending all that time? I think there's a healthy balance of preparation and strategy. But then I think a lot of the learning comes from doing and seeing how people respond to whatever you're selling, or if you're getting any attention and traction. And you can always refine. I'm just one of like, you know, learn, iterate, continue to evolve, as
Yeah.
opposed to like perfect and then launch and hope people are interested.
Mm-hmm. Agreeing. Yeah, I think even thinking back on my own experience in the past year, a lot of my growth has been going out to doing it. Some things work, some things not so well, but taking feedback that you get from your client base, your target market, and taking that feedback and making additions along the way and ultimately crafting your offering along the
Exactly.
way, learning from it. All right. So
Exactly.
as I transition, because I know that our episode is also about strategies for creating partnerships that fuel growth, I wanted to ask you, have partnerships or how have partnerships with your experience played a role in your success in business?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting what we were just talking about and then transitioning to this conversation. So I launched a podcast earlier this month, similar
Mm-hmm.
to everything we were talking about, you
Mm-hmm.
know, just going into it with like, I don't know if this is going to work. Let's just see how people respond. And the first episode we did was around strategic relationships that grow your business. And I think, this whole idea of partnerships is so key when you're building a business. These are the relationships that are going to, set up the foundation for your business. These are the people, and I want to go through like the categories of partnerships that I think are really critical. But basic partnerships are essentially, you know, partnerships that fuel your growth are essentially sales. And I think I work mostly with women, and a lot of them have this fear around the idea of sales because of the nature of it. It feels really transactional, And a lot of the, I guess, methodologies around it are masculine driven typically. And so can make women feel uncomfortable. But I talk a lot about, think about relationships and partnerships as a way to frame sales. You're there to build a partnership with someone to exchange value on both sides. Both people are getting something out of it. There's a mutual benefit. So it doesn't have to feel so slimy and uncomfortable and pushy and manipulative. You're there on both sides to benefit from that kind of partnership. So there's kind of like 4 levels of partnerships that I think people should be thinking about in their business. One is, of course, with your ideal customer. And I really recommend you have that defined to a specific audience, not everyone or not all women. Like, get specific on who your audience is and, what their problems are and where they're at in their business, what questions they have, because ultimately you'll grow faster that way. So specificity, but your ideal client, your ideal customer is your first type of partnership that you want to invest in. The second is complementary, service providers that also specialize in working with that same audience. So maybe there's someone that does something different to you, but they're also working with that audience, and your offer ultimately benefits their business and vice versa. And you can build a partnership with people in your that also work with your ideal customer in that way. And there's potential referrals to be had from that, but there's also learnings, there's exchange of knowledge, tons of benefit. The third is people who influence your ideal customer. So that could be a business coach, an advisor, a therapist, anyone who's kind of, depending on who your ideal customer is, who's in their ear and, probably hearing a lot of the questions they have and guiding them to partnerships that are going to be a good fit for them. So you want to be investing in those partnerships because, they're trusted advisors to the people that you want to work with. And then the third one is thinking about people who work with your ideal customer before or after you do. So someone who's either inheriting your work and making sure that you have a really strong partnership with those people, a strong understanding, so that you're ultimately leaving them with something that is usable and is going to make their work better. And on the flip side, someone who maybe is doing work before you with your customer and can provide insights or refer business to you after they've completed their portion of the work. So I think a lot of times when people think about partnerships, they're thinking in a very singular way. They're thinking about only their customer. And I think you want to think more holistically about all the people who are influencing your ideal customer and the people that are touching that customer who could potentially, be of value to you in the work you're doing. And if you're really investing in those 4 types of partnerships, it's going to fuel your growth in ways you wouldn't be able to do if you're just going at it through, one-dimensional approach.
So true. And my question for you next is then, if you are making an outreach to some of those other categories, so 2, 3, and 4 there, what do you suggest, or what is even your preference in someone approaching you for those types of partnerships, literally coming right out and proposing that partnership and offering what it is that they can offer to you and vice versa, or how to approach you with a potential partnership between the two?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of people approach this wrong. You don't want to reach out and ask for something right away. You want to give before you get, and that's key. And, a partnership is ultimately a relationship. And if you don't have a relationship with someone at all, and you're just saying, hey, can you refer me business? It's definitely not going to go down well. So my suggestion is always depth over breadth. So you don't need 100 people. You don't need 100 partnerships. You just need a few really good ones. You want to make sure you have similar philosophies in the way that you approach your work and the way you think about your clients' work. And you're only going to know that by getting to know them. So I would suggest, if you're reaching out to people, that you set up a networking chat and you just say, hey, obviously we're both in the same space. It'd be great to get to know you a little bit better, the work you do and who you serve, so we can potentially help each other. It's not it's not bad to put that out there, that that's your intention. It's
Mhm.
just in the way that, not asking for something straight off the bat. Like, first get to know them and make sure there's a good synergy there. And then, it's also making sure you're really talking to people that do work with the same type of people, because there's a personality layer to it, right? So some customers are going to be attracted to a certain type of person and personality. And if that's very different to yours, they're probably going to attract people that aren't going to be a great fit for
Mhm.
you. So there's that. And then there's like the mechanics of like who the ideal customer is. Are you working in the same kind of industry or industries? Is it the same size business? Um, things like that. So if you're reaching out, you want to get on a call with them so you can kind of vet those things to make sure, like, okay, we think alike, we have similar philosophies, there's a lot of alignment in like personality, or at least there's complements there, and we have the same expertise with the same type of audience. Then I suggest, if that all lines up, putting out that intention, like, hey, we should totally help each other. How could I support you? Always ask and give before you get. And usually when you open up that conversation initially, it is returned.
Mhm.
Um, and then you want to kind of stay in touch with that person over time. Show them you're continually investing in them, supporting their business. That could be as little as like having an alert on when they post on social media, so that you're kind of supporting them in their business in that way. Um, but definitely give it a little bit of time to get to know them, watch them in their business. And then, there's just a natural point where it feels like, okay, let's formalize this partnership in terms of a referral agreement, and you can approach that at that point. But like anything, right? Like in dating, you're not going to be like, hey, let's get married on your first date. Like, you kind of have to let it's like any other relationship. You have to let it organically get to a point where you're like, hey, we really trust each other, we really vibe. Let's formalize something here. But I definitely recommend giving before you get. And if you can send them a referral
Mhm.
before, and then see if like they are able to reciprocate that, and then you're like, hey, clearly we refer business to each other, why don't we formalize a contract where we can each benefit from that, and let that get to that point naturally.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was just kind of thinking through as you were sharing that information, a good opportunity is when you're out at networking events or going to conferences and you're encountering these relationships. I think, maybe I speak for myself and others don't do this, but sometimes or too often you take back people's contact information. You may connect with them on platforms, but sometimes that relationship isn't necessarily actively growing, or it may be very minimal. But if we make more effort in building those relationships, getting to know each other's businesses, especially when you have that synergy and align with one another,
Yeah.
and putting in that effort, so that who knows, there may be opportunities for partnerships.
Exactly. And I think it's like knowing everyone's running their own business, doing their own stuff. If they're not sending you referrals, it's not because they don't like you or they're whatever. They have they're in their own world, right? They're the hero in their own story. So I think also people get offended very easily by like, this person hasn't, but but I think it's as much as you can invest in the relationships, the deeper the relationship, like my deepest partnerships, I don't need to remind them I'm there, because we have a very, we're constantly texting or DMing each other. We're always in each other's worlds and orbits. So I know we're thinking of each other. If you're going to meet someone once at a conference, like, they're going to be meeting, I'm sure they met, 50 people at that conference. And there's it's not a reflection of them if they don't remember you. It's on you to continually invest in that person. And I also think, like, we don't have to be overwhelmed by, oh my God, I met 50 people, I need to like individually have a call with all those 50 people. I think it's being savvy around. There were 3 out of those 50 that I should definitely follow up with and have calls with because they directly have a connection to my ideal customer, like, or I have something to learn from them. So you don't have to overwhelm yourself, I think, with like having perfect relationships with every single person you meet. Like we have a capacity for how many people we can maintain depth with, but being savvy around who those right people are is really important. You're probably also going to outgrow certain partnerships through your business, depending on the pace at which you're growing. You might
Mhm.
outgrow some of the people that were incredible referral partners for the first year of your business. And now you're kind of getting into a new tier of clients and they're still kind of working with an earlier stage business. And that's okay to outgrow them and continue to support them if you can, but that's okay too. I
Mhm.
think kind of constantly curating the partnerships around you to be the ones that are going to support your business based on where you're at today is really important.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even just reflecting back or thinking about some of the partnerships that I work with or have currently, yes, some of them align entirely with my business and what it is that I'm doing. However, you made me recognize right now that some of these other relationships are partnerships, even if they weren't made formal, if you will, because some of their connections that I've made and worked with other businesses or entrepreneurs along the way, we do entirely different things, but have kept in touch, support each other's businesses in certain ways. We are texting each other saying, hey, I met this person and now I'm thinking of you and your business. You should reach out to them. I'm going to introduce you on LinkedIn or
Yeah.
give them contact information if you're interested.
And I was gonna, you made me think to touch on not every partnership needs to be a referral partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I have there's other consultants that are good friends of mine that sometimes it's an emotional, like someone I can turn to when I'm going through something in my business, and I know they'll understand because they have a similar business. That's
Mm-hmm.
still a partnership that has tons of value. Or I have another consultant who we will do an exchange of services. So we were just going through, both of us, a slow season in our business. We're like, let's do a 3-hour workshop. I'll do an hour and a half on your business. You do an hour and a half on mine. And there's so much value we're getting out of that. Now, like, we're not necessarily the best referral partners for each other, but there's so much value we're able to glean. So it's not always about referral. It's not always about like, who am I going to be able to monetize revenue from, but also who can provide value in different ways, whether it's emotional or they're lending you a skill set that you don't have, and you're able to do the same for them in return. But I think regardless, what's key is that exchange, that equal exchange, and equal value that's coming from, I'm giving something to you, you're giving something to me,
Mm-hmm.
so that both people feel like they're mutually benefiting from the partnership.
So true. And then going back to some of those partnerships where you are giving each other referrals that you're able to monetize from based on your expertise or experience, what do you recommend, having a formal agreement or formal referral contract in place, or how do you normally approach that?
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends on your relationship to the person. Um, if you do have a contract, I think it's really important to that whatever the referral fee is a equal reflection of the value of both people's work. So, for example, if you run a business, I'll just use agencies for examples because that's who I work with. If you run an agency and your kind of minimum project fee is $50,000, and then there's a strategic partnership with a fractional CMO whose monthly retainer is $5,000. Those are two different fee structures. So you have to figure out like how, if they refer you a 50K project, what is the value of that referral to you, and what is the value of a referral to them, and you want to make it kind of like equal. So I sometimes there's a percent that works on both, to both partners, but sometimes a fixed fee is better because it's more of an equal exchange. And I think that really just depends on who the two people are that are coming together and what kind of business they're referring to each other. And I think you kind of have to do what works for you and for the partner that you're coming together with. Other
Mhm.
people don't have a formal agreement, but they just kind of make a deal like, hey, every time you send me business, I'll give you $1,000 and vice versa. So I think it really depends. But obviously, I do think if you have someone who's consistently referring you business and you don't have any kind of like reward, it's a miss. And you should really think about making sure they're incentivized to continue referring business. As much as some people do it, out of kindness, at some point, I promise they're going to be a little resentful if there's nothing in it for them, because it is work. Even those super connectors who are always networking with people, it's a job. And you want to, if you want to continue to, if they're referring you great people, and you want to continue to get those referrals, you want to incentivize them and show them that you're grateful for that. Plus,
Mhm.
they're saving you significant time. We all know how hard it is to acquire a new client, and it can be, especially in kind of like seasons like this, it can take a lot of time to close a new client. And if they're handing you people that are essentially buyer ready and, quality clients, you want to make sure you're kind of that you're compensating them for the time they've saved you too.
Mhm. So true. Well, I do want to transition over to Waverly Avenue and your consulting offerings. So I know that you partner with agency owners to create growth. Can you share a little bit more about Waverly and what it is that you do specifically for your business?
Yeah. So I start at like a mission and purpose level because that really is what consistently drives my business. And the offers can change, based on me, the season I'm in. But my purpose is to help, first of all, help more women come into the creative agency space, because less than 1% of creative agencies are owned by women. And that's
Mhm.
something I'm really focused on changing. Helping more women succeed. I think the agency model works against women in a lot of ways. And I really am committed to rethinking that model to the benefit of everyone, not
Mhm.
just women, but to also make sure women can succeed. And the second thing that really drives my business is less than 2% of women owned businesses make it to seven figures.
Wow.
When I learned that, it was really shocking to me, because when I started my business, that was a goal of mine. And so to learn that, I felt like, wow, that's that's crazy that there's not more women in that place. Um, so those are the things that really drive my business. Um, and I'm really focused on, working with agency owners to grow, but in ways that are sustainable and help avoid some of the things that I went through in my career, burnout, the feast and famine cycles. And I want to help them build stronger, more sustainable agencies from the foundations up. So currently, I do one-on-one consulting. I have an incubator program. Um, for earlier stage agencies. And then I also do advising for more established agencies that I just want a sounding board and maybe don't need so much of the support in rebuilding the foundations. And then I also newly am a podcast host, and I host a podcast called Agency Office Hours, where that's sort of like where people can get value as much as they can for free from me. And so, I really see myself as an advocate for agency owners in this space, and people can work with me in different ways to different capacities based on where they're at. But I'm really passionate about the work I do, and really focused on changing those statistics, to help more women succeed.
Yes, that's great. And when you say agency owners, just for my own clarification, are they marketing companies, or can you elaborate on your target audience, and who agency owners are for you?
Yeah, so creative service businesses is how I would capture that. So some of my clients are consultants. They don't have a full agency structure. They're solopreneurs, or maybe they have like a small support team. Others are what you would kind of think of more traditionally as a creative agency model, and they have teams of up to maybe like 10, 15 people. Um, and I kind of work with everyone in between, people who have collective models, people who have partnerships. Um, but as I said, they're kind of in the multi six figure range. They haven't hit their seven, and they've built a business organically, mostly built on referrals. They got into the industry often by accident. They quit usually an agency job or brand side marketing job, wanted to go out on their own, wanted freedom and flexibility,
Mhm.
started kind of freelancing, and this business grew around them and referrals kept coming, but they never built the business with intention to grow it or scale it. So there was a lot of the foundations of their business aren't setting them up for success in the long term. It's sort of a short-term reactive based business. Um, and that can only take you so far. There's going to be a point where it doesn't work for you. It burns you out.
Mhm.
And you hit, revenue thresholds that you can't break through. So I kind of come in at that point that they've been building it maybe 3, 5, 7, 10 years. It depends on how quickly they've grown. But usually they're out of that first few years, and they're at that point where they're like, okay, I'm kind of done with this reactive business where I'm sort of taking anything I can get and I'm waiting for the next person to reach out to me. And I want to be more proactive and intentional in the way I'm building my business. I want to build a business that works for me instead of the other way around. And those are the people I love working with. I'm like, great, you have a proven concept, you have an audience, you have a great portfolio of work. Now let's kind of fix and make this business work better for you in terms of, who you're targeting, how you're positioned, what your revenue model looks like, and then what your sales strategy is, so we can help get you back to growth and um, give you a good runway to get to that 7-figure milestone.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
as we begin to close out, I do want to ask you, for those who are perhaps just starting out in their business in general, so aside from agency owners, but entrepreneurs altogether, maybe just starting out, what are some practical steps that they may be able to take to start building kinds of partnerships that will maybe support them in the long-term growth and success that they are aiming for?
Yeah. Um, I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think a lot of times we can feel like when we're getting started that we are bothering people, but there's plenty of people like me who would love to help and support people who are just getting
Mhm.
started. Um, and I would say, reach out to people that you come across on LinkedIn or Instagram that you aspire to be, and tell them that and say, I'd love to learn how you got started. You know, people really, not everyone, but most people really enjoy sharing their journey and giving helpful advice to people that are following behind them. So the more people you can talk to, the better. And I think relationships will naturally come from that, or you'll get directed to, they might recommend you to somebody else who recommends you to someone else. So I would just recommend being open, reaching out to as many people as you can in a very genuine way. Um, being thoughtful in the way you reach out to them, and making sure you did your work before you reached out, not just spamming a bunch of people.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just kind of ask questions, be curious. That's the best way. And I think the second thing, which we kind of touched on earlier, is don't be too precious about what the business needs to be or what it needs to look like. If you have an intention to, bring something to the world, go in open and curious, and kind of leave some room for the market to kind of direct you towards where your value is or who needs your help the most. There were tons of ideas when I was starting my business that I was kind of set on doing that, never happened. They just didn't take off. And I wasn't precious about it. And still I'm not. I try things all the time, and they don't take off. I'm like, okay, move on, next idea. So, you need some things in place in terms of, like, you can't be completely open to, like, I could launch a shoe brand, or I could, do toothpaste. Like, you want some direction based on your experience and career. But as much as you can kind of like remain open to some degree and be curious. I think that's the best way to go into building a business.
It's great. Such great advice altogether. And as we close out, can you share with listeners and followers as where they can find you and connect with you following this episode?
Yes. So on LinkedIn, Melissa Lohrer, you can find me there. On Instagram, I'm at waverly.Avenue Consulting and now at Agency Office Hours, which is our podcast Instagram page. So you can find me in all those places. You can get advice around building and growing an agency in all those places. And I genuinely love when people reach out and ask questions and connect. So don't be shy. If you listened and you have questions, let me know.
And I'll definitely be sure to link all of your contact information, your sites, and platforms that you're present on, so no one has any trouble finding you and locating you. But overall, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today and insights on partnerships, as well as what it is that you do at Waverly. Ultimately, we know that it's clear that partnerships can be game changer for anyone's business growth, regardless of industry. So being mindful and making an active effort to building those relationships and outreach for those partnerships to essentially bloom into
Yeah.
something. So
Well, thank you so much for having me, Laura. And by the way, love the name of this podcast. I think those three things are what you need at every stage of growing a business. And so it like perfectly sums up what my journey has been as a business owner. Equal parts, you need the grit, growth, and grace. So awesome chatting with you. Thank you for having me.